Snow fell in slow, lazy flakes outside Aspen Ridge Resort, dusting the pine trees and turning the cobblestone driveway into a winter postcard. Inside, the lobby glowed with warm, golden light, polished marble floors gleaming beneath crystal chandeliers. A fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, casting flickers of orange across the smiling faces of guests in ski jackets and cashmere scarves. Naomi Carter stepped through the employees' entrance at 6:30 a.m., tugging off her knit hat and shaking the snow from her hair. Her uniform was simple: black slacks, white blouse, navy housekeeping vest, but she kept it immaculate. She'd learned a long time ago that presentation mattered, especially when people were already judging you before you spoke. "Morning, Marcus," she said to the security guard at the side door. "Morning, Naomi." Marcus's deep voice carried the easy warmth of someone who knew everyone by name. "Cold one today." "Coldest yet," she replied, stamping her boots on the mat. She signed in, collected her housekeeping cart, and rolled it toward the service elevator. Rosa Martinez, her friend and co-worker, caught up to her halfway down the corridor. Rosa was short, round-faced, and always moving a little faster than everyone else. "You hear the news?" Rosa's eyes sparkled. "Depends which news you're talking about," Naomi said, pressing the elevator button. "VIP check-in last night. Ethan Cole. Yes, that Ethan Cole." Naomi blinked. "The tech guy?" Rosa nodded like she was revealing state secrets. "Worth billions. Owns half the stuff you see in airports. Supposed to be some genius. Penthouse suite." The elevator dinged. Naomi rolled her cart inside, Rosa close behind. "I'll stick to my floor," Naomi said. "Doubt I'll even see him." "Don't bet on it," Rosa replied with a grin. But an hour later, Tom Bradley, the hotel's general manager, proved Rosa right. "Carter!" Tom called across the staff lounge, his voice brisk and clipped. He was a tall man in his 50s with perfect hair and the kind of suit you only wore if you never did physical work. "Penthouse needs a quick touch-up. Guest stepped out for a meeting." "Yes, sir," Naomi said, keeping her tone neutral. She wheeled her cart into the private elevator that served only the top floor. The ride was silent except for the hum of machinery and the soft jazz playing over hidden speakers. When the doors opened, the hallway felt different, quieter, more insulated, the carpet so thick it swallowed her footsteps. The penthouse door swung open before she knocked. Ethan Cole stood there, phone in hand, suit jacket over one arm. He was tall, with neatly combed dark hair and eyes the color of slate. Up close, he looked every bit the magazine cover, except for something off in the way he held himself. "Housekeeping," Naomi said softly. He gave a short nod and stepped aside, barely looking at her as he continued his call. She moved into the suite, taking in the panoramic windows that framed the snow-covered mountains. The living room smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. She began tidying, folding a throw blanket, wiping a glass ring from the coffee table, while Ethan paced near the window. "I told you, Tokyo by Friday or we lose the contract," he said into the phone, his voice low and urgent. Naomi tried not to listen, but her eyes kept drifting to the way he moved. His gait was uneven, his left leg stiff. Every few minutes he shifted his weight and reached down to rub his calf as though it were cramping. His skin, under the tan, looked pale. She'd seen that combination before. Her aunt, 4 years ago, swollen leg, shortness of breath, brushed off as just tired. It had been a blood clot, one that nearly killed her. Ethan ended the call with a sigh and sank into an armchair. His hand went to his calf again, pressing harder this time. Naomi's fingers paused on the polishing cloth. "You all right, sir?" she asked before she could stop herself. His head came up, eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm fine, just jet lag." "Jet lag doesn't usually make your leg hurt," she said gently. His mouth tightened. "You a doctor, Miss Carter?" "And no, sir, just seen it before." "Well, thanks for your concern, Ms. Carter, but I have a meeting." He stood, slipped into his jacket, and crossed to the door. She stepped back to let him pass. When the door closed behind him, Naomi stood alone in the immaculate suite, the echo of his uneven footsteps fading down the hall. She told herself it wasn't her business. She told herself people like Ethan Cole had personal doctors, assistants, entire teams to take care of them. But as she wheeled her cart out, her grandmother's words came back unbidden. God gave you eyes to see and hands to help. Don't waste either. And Naomi couldn't shake the image of his pale face and stiff leg as the elevator carried her down to the lower floors. Naomi finished the penthouse and rode the service elevator down to the basement level, where the air smelled faintly of bleach and coffee. The staff cafeteria was already humming, prep cooks clattering pans, housekeepers swapping gloves for paper cups. She poured herself a drip coffee and dropped 2 creamers in, the way her grandmother used to, and found Rosa at a corner table scrolling on her phone. "Well?" Rosa asked without looking up. "Did you see him?" "I saw him," Naomi said, wrapping her hands around the paper cup. "He's not well." Rosa's eyes flicked up. Not well like rich people flu, or not well like actually not well. "Like a swollen leg and a man who can't quite catch his breath but won't admit it," Naomi said. Rosa grimaced. "Oof, and I suppose you told him." "I asked if he was all right." Naomi took a sip. "He said it was jet lag." "Girl, it is always jet lag or stress with those types." Rosa leaned in. "Rule number 1, we tidy, we smile, we don't diagnose." "I know," Naomi said. She did know. There were policies. There were always policies. But the image of Ethan rubbing his calf would not leave her mind. Still, Rosa echoed softer now. "Be careful, okay? Tom's on a tear this week. He snapped at Marta for putting the wrong lavender spray in a VIP room." Tom Bradley proved the point 15 minutes later during the morning stand-up near the laundry chute. He rattled off assignments with a pen like a conductor's baton. "Cole's suite gets 2 refreshes a day. Keep out of his way. No chatter, no selfies, no unsolicited anything." His gaze paused on Naomi just long enough to make it personal. "Understood?" "Understood," Naomi said with everyone else. By late morning, the resort settled into its rhythm. Naomi cleaned a run of deluxe doubles on the 4th floor, moving with practiced efficiency. Strip, sort, check for personal items, remake, reset. She smoothed duvet corners with quick, precise taps, lined up water bottles by the desk, set the thermostat to a comfortable 72. Her cart held the small kindnesses she liked to leave: a little packet of honey by the tea, an extra face cloth near the sink, things guests would never know were hers, but that still felt like her signature. On the 5th floor, an elderly couple stepped into the hall just as Naomi opened a supply closet. The woman clutched her husband's arm. "I'm sorry," she told Naomi, breathless but smiling. "Do you know where we can find the easiest route to the lobby? The altitude?" "There's a bench by the elevator," Naomi said. "Take it slow. Do you want some water?" "That would be lovely," the woman said, relieved. Naomi popped a bottled water from her cart, cracked the seal, and handed it over with a napkin. The man tipped his head. "Thank you, miss." "Of course," Naomi said. She watched until they reached the elevator, then turned back to her cart. It wasn't much. It wasn't emergency medicine, but you didn't wait to be someone's hero to be kind. Just before noon, Tom radioed, "Carter, penthouse now. Quick refresh." When Naomi reached the top floor hall again, it felt even quieter than before, like a museum after hours. The door was ajar. She knocked and stepped in. Ethan wasn't there. A tablet blinked awake on the coffee table with a calendar full of overlapping meetings. 2 espresso cups sat abandoned, one with a half moon of lipstick. Someone else had been here. The desk held a neat stack of printed financials laid out next to a laptop with a spreadsheet full of red numbers. She moved through the space, resetting, replacing, collecting. In the bathroom, she tossed a liner and lifted the trash. A torn cardboard sleeve lay inside. Compression socks. Graduated pressure. She tied the trash neatly and set it aside, then froze. On the stone counter, mixed in with a high-end toiletry kit and a gold-trimmed travel toothbrush, sat a blister pack of over-the-counter painkillers and an unlabeled amber bottle. She didn't touch them. She didn't need to. The picture was already forming. When she returned a clean stack of towels to the rack, Ethan came in, phone to his ear. His face looked more drawn than it had that morning, and he paused in the doorway like the walk down the hall had stolen his breath. "I don't have time for this," he said into the phone. A cough slipped out, dry and stubborn. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Move Tokyo to Thursday. Tell them I'll make it work." He ended the call and looked up, as if only now noticing she was there. "You again." "Just a quick refresh," Naomi said. "I can come back." "No, finish." He crossed to the window and stared out at the white slopes, the ant-sized skiers threading along. His hand went to his calf again, pressing through the fabric like he could knead the pain away. "Do you ski, Miss Carter?" "Not on this salary," Naomi said, then wished she hadn't. It came out wryer than she intended. To her surprise, a corner of his mouth lifted. "Fair," he exhaled. "I used to. Haven't had time in years." Naomi folded the last towel and set it down. Sometimes the body finds a way to make time. He glanced at her, something like irritation and curiosity wrestling in his eyes. "Meaning?" "Meaning it tells you when you've pushed it past reasonable." She kept her voice neutral, professional. "Altitude can be rough if you aren't used to it. Hydration helps, so does rest." "I don't rest well," he said, almost to himself. Then, more briskly, "You can go." She nodded and headed for the door. At the threshold, she paused. "If your leg's bothering you, sir, the spa keeps compression sleeves. They can send them up." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She heard the soft, steady rhythm of his breathing and the tiny hitch in the middle of it as she pulled the door closed. Back downstairs, Rosa caught her by the ice machine. "You keep finding reasons to be on that floor," she teased, but her eyes searched Naomi's face. "How is he?" "Stubborn. Shock of the century." Rosa lowered her voice. "The general manager said there's a press person sniffing around. Somebody must have seen him in the lobby at midnight. If a camera gets his picture looking sick..." Naomi's stomach tightened. She pictured headlines, men in suits making decisions, a narrative rewritten without her in it. "It's none of our business," she said. Rosa snorted. "You mean it's none of your business? Because I know you, honey. You collect details like other people collect coupons, and then you carry them around until they weigh you down." Naomi smiled despite herself. "I'll be careful." "Do more than be careful," Rosa said. "Be smart. Keep your head down." Afternoon slid into evening. The resort's lobby filled with firelight and laughter, couples heading to the bistro, families shaking snow from boots. Naomi finished her assigned rooms and checked her last list: turndowns, special requests, a rollaway for 312. She refilled her cart with tiny bottles and folded stacks of fresh towels that steamed faintly with warmth. At 7:10, a call came through the housekeeping desk. "Penthouse requested extra towels for the gym." "I'll take it," Naomi said before anyone else could. She rode the private elevator one more time. The hall was hushed, lamplight pooling on the carpet. She knocked. "Housekeeping." "Come in," Ethan's voice called, muffled. He stood by the dining table, one hand braced on the chair back. His tie was loosened, top button undone. A sheen of sweat lay along his hairline, though the room was cool. The left leg of his trousers looked tighter at the calf, the fabric stretched ever so slightly. Naomi set the towels in the bathroom and returned to the doorway. She didn't step farther in. Lines mattered, and she knew exactly where they were. "Do you want them in the gym?" she asked. He shook his head. "Here's fine." She nodded and turned to go. "Miss Carter," he said. She stopped. He was looking at her with a focus that hadn't been there before, like he was finally seeing the human being attached to the uniform. "You've been efficient." "Thank you, sir." He hesitated. And discreet. Naomi dipped her chin. That's the job. He stared at the mountain darkness a moment longer. Is there a doctor on call? Yes, Naomi said evenly. Aspen Valley has a concierge physician who does hotel visits, very discreet. He nodded as if considering it, then dismissed the idea with a tight shake of his head. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow works better if you're still feeling bad today, Naomi said softly. His jaw hardened. Good night, Ms. Carter. Good night, Mr. Cole. She left him there, took the elevator down, and signed out at the staff door. Outside, the night had sharpened. The sky glowed indigo over the peaks, and her breath hung visible in the air. Naomi tugged on her hat and started toward the bus stop. Halfway there, she stopped and looked back at the lit windows of the penthouse level. Somewhere behind that glass, a man everyone envied was losing a quiet fight with his own body. She could feel the old tug again, responsibility without authority, concern without permission. She pulled out her phone and opened a browser, her thumb typing on instinct. Leg swelling, shortness of breath, travel risk signs. She knew the answers. She didn't need a web page to tell her. Still, seeing the list, the red flags in plain text, made something settle inside her. It wasn't hysteria. It wasn't her imagination. It was a pattern. On the bus, she took the last seat and cradled her gloved hands, fighting the urge to call someone, anyone. Her grandmother would have said a prayer. Naomi whispered one into her scarf anyway, not for miracles, but for clarity, for the nerve to do the right thing at the right time, whatever that turned out to be. At home, the radiator clanked to life as she hung her coat and kicked off her boots. The little apartment was clean, spare, everything in its place. On the counter, a stack of community college brochures sat under a magnet. The business program she wanted but couldn't afford until her brother graduated. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. You working late? Eat something. Love you. She smiled and sent a quick heart back. Then she made a grilled cheese, ate half, and stood at the window with the other half cooling in her hand. Across the street, a dog walker shuffled past in a puffy coat. In the apartment above hers, someone practiced scales on a piano, careful and slow. Naomi washed her dish and dried it and set it back in the rack. Then she did the one small act she could justify to herself without breaking a single rule. She set her alarm for an hour earlier than usual. If the call came, if a tray sat untouched outside a door, if a thud echoed through a quiet hall, she would be the one to hear it. It's not my business, she said aloud to the empty room, testing the sentence, feeling how untrue it sounded in her mouth. Her grandmother's voice rose up in memory, warm and steady. Eyes to see, hands to help. Naomi slipped into bed and clicked off the lamp. The dark ceiling waited. After a long minute, she reached over and turned the alarm up one more notch, just in case. The morning after her early alarm experiment, Naomi arrived at Aspen Ridge with the same careful pace she always kept. Snow still drifted down in small, powdery flakes, catching in her hair as she crossed the side lot. She'd checked the penthouse service orders before clocking in. No requests. If Ethan Cole had needed anything in the night, she hadn't been called. Marcus greeted her at the side entrance, a steaming paper cup in hand. Hot chocolate today, he said. Cold's biting worse than usual. Naomi smiled. Thanks. Any excitement overnight? Quiet as the grave, Marcus replied, then frowned. Except, well, the med van pulled up around midnight. Not an ambulance. One of those concierge doctor services. Didn't stay long. Naomi's pulse kicked up. Which floor? Marcus smirked. Like you don't know. She sipped the chocolate to hide her reaction. It could have been anyone, or it could have been exactly who she thought. In the staff lounge, Rosa was already halfway through a breakfast burrito. Your VIP survived the night? I guess so. Naomi set her things in her locker. Marcus said a doctor came by. That's not a bad sign, Rosa said, wiping her hands. Means he's not totally stubborn. But Naomi wasn't so sure. She'd seen stubbornness dressed as compliance before. Patients taking the bare minimum advice just to get people off their backs. Her first assignment that day was the 5th floor, but halfway through the second room, her radio crackled. "Carter to penthouse. Refresh request." It was earlier than usual for the morning pass. Naomi wheeled her cart into the private elevator. When the doors opened, Ethan was on the phone again, his voice sharp but quieter than the day before. He sat at the dining table in gym clothes, black track pants, long-sleeve tee, and a towel draped around his neck. She entered quietly, glancing at the table. A half-eaten breakfast sat pushed to one side, eggs untouched, toast nibbled, coffee gone. He ended the call and leaned back, eyes closing for a moment, as though even that conversation had cost him. "Everything all right, sir?" Naomi asked, careful with the formality. "Fine," he said, without opening his eyes. "Meeting ran late last night. Didn't sleep." She moved to straighten the sofa cushions, but her gaze snagged on the wastebasket. Inside was a familiar sight, another cardboard sleeve for compression socks, torn and discarded. Beneath it, the amber pill bottle she'd seen yesterday, still without a label. She didn't touch it. But she noted how his left leg, bent over the other knee, looked subtly swollen at the ankle. When she carried fresh towels into the bathroom, she caught her reflection in the mirror and saw the faint crease between her brows. She'd promised herself to keep her head down. This was not keeping her head down. Back in the living room, Ethan had picked up a folder from the table, scanning it. "Do you ski?" he asked suddenly. The question threw her. "Not really, sir." "Shame. Best snow we've had in years." He flipped a page, his voice casual, but his breathing not. It had that shallow lift, the way people sound when their lungs feel smaller than they should. "You could still enjoy the view," Naomi said. He gave a short laugh. "View doesn't close contracts." Before she could answer, the suite door opened. Michael Harris stepped in, mid-30s, sleek suit, an aura of perpetual hurry. His smile was quick, professional, and utterly dismissive toward Naomi. "Ethan, we need to finalize the Asia numbers before Tokyo wakes up again." Ethan waved a hand. "In a minute." Michael glanced at Naomi. "Do you mind?" She collected her cart, wheeling it toward the door without comment. As she passed, she heard Michael's voice drop. "You've got that presentation tomorrow. Investors can't see you looking half dead." The door shut behind her. Naomi stood for a moment in the thick carpeted hall, the words echoing in her head. That afternoon, Naomi found herself assigned to the staff corridor behind the penthouse floor, where the laundry chute and service pantry sat. She was restocking linens when she heard voices through the wall. Tom Bradley's low baritone and a woman's measured professional tone. "Told him to get checked out immediately," the woman was saying. "Dr. Sterling, I appreciate your concern," Tom replied, "but Mr. Cole has declined. There's nothing more I can—" "He's at high risk," the woman, Dr. Rebecca Sterling, cut in. "Long flight, altitude, sedentary work habits, and now he's showing symptoms. If he throws a clot, he could be dead in minutes." Naomi's hand stilled on the stack of sheets. Tom sighed. "You know our position. We don't interfere unless the guest requests it." There was a pause, then Sterling's voice, quieter. "Sometimes they can't request it." Naomi stepped back from the wall, her mind running ahead. She'd been right, and if Dr. Sterling was right, the clock was ticking. Later, in the cafeteria, Rosa slid into the seat across from her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Naomi hesitated, then shook her head. "Just a long day." But Rosa wasn't fooled. "Whatever you're thinking, remember, it's not our problem unless the guest makes it our problem." Naomi stirred her soup without tasting it. "What if it becomes our problem because he collapses in one of our hallways?" Rosa's eyes softened. "Then you do what you have to do. But until then—" She spread her hands. Naomi nodded. But deep down, she knew waiting might mean doing nothing at all. Her last task of the day was turn down service for the 6th floor. When she reached the elevator, she glanced at the penthouse button. She told herself not to press it. She pressed it anyway. The hall was quiet. No service orders, no calls. But as she passed the suite, she heard a cough inside. Sharp, dry, persistent. Naomi moved on, but the sound followed her down the hall, each echo a reminder that tomorrow might be too late. Naomi tried to lose herself in the rhythm of her work that evening. Smooth sheets, folded corners, the whisper of curtains closing against the mountain night. But the cough from the penthouse kept threading back into her thoughts. She finished the last turn down on her list and returned her cart to the service room. Most of the housekeeping crew had already clocked out. The corridors were quiet except for the low hum of the heating vents. In the locker room, she traded her uniform vest for her heavy parka. Her phone buzzed with a message from David. "Got the scholarship letter? I'm in." A smile broke across her face before the weight in her chest returned. Her brother's win only deepened her resolve. He needed her steady income, and she couldn't afford to make the wrong kind of waves at work. As she stepped outside into the brittle cold, she glanced up instinctively at the penthouse windows. Only one was lit, a warm square against the indigo sky. A shadow moved across it, slow and deliberate, and for a second she thought she saw Ethan's hand at the glass, as if steadying himself. The bus ride home was quiet. She sat near the back, listening to the engine's low rumble, the faint squeak of snow-packed tires on asphalt. She told herself to let it go, that she'd done her part by noticing, by quietly passing the word to Rosa. But another voice, the one that sounded a lot like her grandmother, kept asking, "And what if no one else does anything?" The next morning brought bright sun over the mountains, sparkling off the slopes in a way that made the whole town look like a snow globe. Naomi arrived early, hoping the rush of checkouts and ski runs would distract her. In the staff lounge, Rosa handed her a coffee. "Guess who's making headlines?" Naomi's stomach dipped. "Ethan Cole?" "Yep. Some business blog says he's closing another mega deal. No mention of him being here, thank God. PR must be keeping a lid on it." Rosa's eyes narrowed. "You going to tell me what's really bothering you?" Naomi shook her head. "It's nothing." But by mid-morning, nothing was standing right in front of her in the penthouse gym. She'd been sent up with extra water bottles and found Ethan on the treadmill, moving at a slow walk, face pale, sweat soaking the collar of his shirt. "Delivery," she said, setting the water down. He grunted in acknowledgement, but his right hand gripped the rail like a lifeline. She could hear the shallow lift in his breath, even over the quiet hum of the machine. "You should slow down," she said before she could stop herself. "This is slow," he replied without looking at her. "Slow enough not to hurt you?" He met her eyes then, just for a second, and she saw it. Something like fatigue laced with irritation, but also a flicker of uncertainty, as if he wasn't entirely sure what his own body was doing to him. Naomi didn't press. She left him with the water and returned to the service elevator, her pulse pounding. That night, back in her apartment, she set her alarm even earlier. She couldn't explain why, not to Rosa, not even to herself, but she knew she wanted to be in the building when the next sign came. Because it would come. She could feel it, like a shift in the weather you smell before the clouds roll in. And when it did, she intended to be the one who noticed. The morning began with a heavy gray sky pressing low over Aspen Ridge. The snow had stopped, but the air carried that metallic chill that promised more was coming. Naomi clocked in, collected her cart, and scanned the day's assignments. As usual, the penthouse refresh sat at the bottom of the list, marked VIP, minimal contact. She was halfway through a standard suite on the 4th floor when her radio crackled. "Carter, penthouse refresh now. Guest has stepped out." She felt the small knot of tension in her stomach tighten. Ethan Cole stepping out was rare. Most days he seemed anchored to his suite. She took the service elevator up, the hum of the machinery underscoring the quiet in her chest. The penthouse was still, almost too still. The fireplace was cold, a neat stack of logs untouched. She moved through the rooms, straightening, dusting, noting a breakfast tray in the kitchen, fruit barely touched, coffee cup drained to the dregs. In the bathroom, she noticed something new, a small white medical device on the counter, like a portable pulse oximeter. She knew the type from her aunt's hospital visits. It clipped onto a finger to measure oxygen levels. She didn't touch it, but she saw the faint green glow of its display, still on, still tracking. By the time she finished and wheeled her cart out into the hall, Ethan was there, coming toward her. His suit jacket was slung over one arm, and his face was pale under the lobby's warm lighting. "Morning?" she said. He gave a faint nod. "Thanks. She held the elevator for him, but he shook his head. "Need to take the stairs. Doctor's orders. Movement's good for me." She hesitated. "As long as you don't overdo it." The ghost of a smile passed over his lips. Always a critic. She let the doors close, but the unease stayed with her. By mid-afternoon, the resort was buzzing. Skiers returning from the slopes, families crowding the lobby for cocoa, the bell staff hauling gear through the snow-damp doors. Naomi was on the 5th floor, stripping a bed, when she heard the call over the radio. "All available staff to penthouse floor. Medical assist required." Her heart jolted. She dropped the sheets and ran for the service elevator. The hall outside the penthouse was chaos. Tom Bradley barking orders, Michael Harris pacing, 2 bellmen hovering uselessly by the door. Naomi pushed through. "I have first aid training," she said. Tom's eyes narrowed. "We have it handled." But a sound from inside cut him off. A thud, then a muffled groan. Naomi didn't wait for permission. She darted into the suite. Ethan lay on the floor near the armchair, one hand clutching his calf, the other braced against the carpet. His face was ashen, and his breaths came in short, shallow bursts. "Mr. Cole," Naomi said, kneeling beside him, "I'm going to help you, all right?" He tried to speak, but the words dissolved into a cough. She looked up at the cluster of men in the doorway. "Call 911, now." Tom hesitated. "We should— now!" Her voice cracked like a whip. "He's showing signs of a pulmonary embolism. If we wait, he could die." For a beat, no one moved. Then Michael cursed under his breath and pulled out his phone. Naomi eased Ethan onto his back, elevating his legs slightly. "Stay with me," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Breathe slow if you can. Help's on the way." His eyes flickered open, locking on hers. "You— don't talk," she said. "Just focus on breathing." From the hallway came the faint wail of a siren, distant but growing. Tom stepped in, his voice low and urgent. "Ms. Carter, this is going to create a scene. We need to—" "I don't care," she snapped, not looking away from Ethan. "I care about keeping him alive." The siren grew louder, the red-blue wash of light spilling into the room as EMTs rushed in with a stretcher. Naomi stepped back but stayed close enough to answer questions. Symptoms she'd noticed. Timeline, the compression socks, the cough. As they lifted Ethan, one EMT glanced at her. "If she hadn't called it in, you'd be planning a funeral." Naomi swallowed hard, the truth of it settling like a stone in her chest. Outside, snowflakes had begun to fall again, the ambulance's lights flashing against the white. Naomi stood in the cold, watching as they loaded Ethan in and slammed the doors. Tom came up beside her. "You'll need to file a statement, and until further notice, you're off the schedule." She turned to face him. "For saving his life?" "For disregarding protocol," he said flatly. "Go home, Ms. Carter." The ambulance pulled away, siren cutting through the mountain air. Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, the chill sinking past her coat. She didn't know if Ethan would survive the night, but she knew she'd done the only thing she could live with. Naomi didn't go home right away. She found an empty linen closet on the service floor, the kind with a single bulb and the scent of detergent, and leaned her forehead against the cool metal shelf until her breathing steadied. Through the cracked door, she could hear the resort exhale into evening. Cartwheels, distant laughter, the soft footfalls of guests on thick carpet. She checked her phone. Nothing, no update. Rosa found her there a few minutes later, cheeks pink from the cold and worry sharpening her voice. "They said you stormed the penthouse like a firefighter." "I didn't storm anything," Naomi said, though her voice shook. "He was on the floor. He couldn't breathe." Rosa's mouth pressed into a line, then softened. "You did right. Tom's going to make noise because that's who he is, but you did right." Naomi nodded, but the words slid past the fear that sat heavy in her chest. "They said— one of the EMTs said, if we'd waited—" She didn't finish. Rosa squeezed her shoulder. Then we don't play out the what-ifs. We wait for the what-is. They waited in the little room until Naomi's phone finally buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She stepped into the hall to answer. "This is Aspen Valley Hospital," a woman's voice said. "Are you Miss Carter? You were listed as the person on scene for Mr. Ethan Cole." "Yes," Naomi said, gripping the phone. "Is he—" "He's in the ER now. The team is with him. I'm not at liberty to share more details by phone, but the attending asked me to tell you that you acted appropriately and that your rapid decision to call for help likely made a difference." Naomi closed her eyes. "Thank you." She ended the call and leaned back against the wall, the strength going out of her knees for a second. Rosa stepped into her line of sight. "News? He's at the hospital. They said I did the right thing." Saying it aloud loosened something inside her. Relief threaded with dread. Rosa blew out a breath. "Then we hang on to that." The reprieve lasted all of 30 seconds. Tom appeared at the end of the corridor, his tie slightly askew, indignation bringing color to his face. He carried a manila folder as if it were a weapon. "Ms. Carter," he said, and even the way he formed her name sounded like an accusation. "My office! Now!" Rosa started to speak, but Naomi touched her arm and followed Tom down the hall. His office overlooked the lobby, its big window a postcard of firelight and guests with mugs of cocoa. The contrast made the room feel colder than it was. Tom set the folder on the desk, opened it, and slid a paper across to her. "Incident report. Sign that your statement is accurate." Naomi read quickly. The report noted the time she entered the suite, the call to 911, the arrival of paramedics. It also noted violation of guest privacy and failure to obtain consent prior to medical intervention. "My consent would have been a corpse," she said before she could stop herself. Tom's jaw flexed. "Our policies exist to protect guests and this establishment." "From what?" Naomi asked softly. "From accountability?" His eyes cooled another degree. "From lawsuits. You will be suspended, effective immediately, pending a disciplinary review tomorrow at 3. Turn in your key card." Naomi reached for her lanyard. Her hands didn't tremble. She placed the card on his desk as carefully as she handled a crystal glass in a suite. "I'll be there," she said. Tom's gaze flicked to the window, where a couple laughed at something the concierge said. "For what it's worth," he said, voice almost human. "If he dies, there's nothing anyone can do to protect this place from the fallout." Naomi held his eyes. "Then we should be thinking less about walls and more about people in them." He looked away first. Outside the office, Rosa was waiting like an anchor. "Suspended?" Naomi nodded. Rosa's mouth twisted. "I've got leftover Pozzoli at home. You're coming with me. We're not sitting alone with this." I should go to the hospital," Naomi said, already picturing sterile light and the beep of monitors. "You should sleep," Rosa countered. "You look like a wind could knock you over. Go in the morning, when they might actually let you near him." Naomi knew she was right. She let herself be shepherded out the staff exit and into the clear night. The sky was a dark bowl pricked with cold stars. The breaths they exhaled floated and vanished. Rosa's apartment smelled like simmering hominy and cilantro. They ate at the small table, the steam fogging the window, the spoon's clink steadying them both. Rosa talked about ordinary things on purpose, her niece's school play, a neighbor's cranky cat, until some of the adrenaline bled off and Naomi felt like she had a body again. When she finally stepped back into her own apartment later, the quiet landed like a blanket. She hung up her coat, toed off her boots, and set her phone face up on the table. She didn't turn on music. She didn't turn on the TV. She sat and listened to the radiator's soft ticking, to a distant door closing in the hall, to the kind of silence that tallies what matters and what doesn't. She thought of Ethan's eyes finding hers on the floor, the sheer, unguarded fear there. Not the magazine cover intensity, not the boardroom edge. Just a man whose body had betrayed him and who, for once, couldn't argue his way out of it. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She swiped. "Miss Carter?" The voice was male this time, brisk but not unkind. "This is Dr. Sterling from Aspen Valley. I wanted to ensure you received the earlier message." "Yes, doctor," Naomi said, standing without realizing she had. "How is he?" A pause. "He's critical but stable. We're treating a pulmonary embolism. He'll need monitoring. I wanted to tell you personally that your quick action almost certainly saved his life." Naomi gripped the back of the chair. Relief and a fresh wave of fear crashed together in her chest. "Thank you for calling. There will be complexities," the doctor added, choosing the word with care. "Press, perhaps. People with interests beyond his health. If that happens, remember that what you did was right." The line clicked off. Naomi stood very still in her kitchen, the words echoing around the small room. What you did was right. She made tea she didn't drink. She set an alarm she didn't need. She pulled the small locket from the dish by the sink and opened it, the tiny picture of her grandmother smiling up at her like a benediction. "Eyes to see," Naomi whispered. "Hands to help." When she finally lay down, sleep came in flickers. She dreamed of snow falling and an elevator that never arrived and a door that would not open no matter how she pushed. She woke before dawn, heart thudding, and checked her phone. No new messages. She dressed in the gray light, choosing a simple sweater and her warmest coat. She tucked a book into her bag, grabbed a banana she knew she wouldn't eat, and stepped out into the morning. The bus rolled through the waking town, past a bakery venting sweet steam, past the bronze elk statue where tourists took pictures. As they approached the hospital, the mountains loomed, dark blue against the paling sky. Naomi pressed the stop cord and stood. On the sidewalk, the cold bit clean. She looked up at the hospital's windows, some lit, most dark, and felt the familiar rise of resolve in her chest. She wasn't family. She wasn't on a list. She was just the woman who had noticed when no one else did. But she would take a seat in the waiting room and stay until someone told her to leave. At the automatic doors, she paused. The glass slid open on a breath of antiseptic and coffee. Somewhere beyond triage, machines beeped, footsteps clicked, voices muffled by masks and distance. Naomi took a step forward. She didn't know what would happen next. At the review meeting, with her job, with the man whose life she'd nudged back from an edge he hadn't believed in. She only knew this. She would keep showing up. And until she heard otherwise, she would hold on to the one truth that had carried her through every long night of work and worry. Sometimes, noticing is the first act of courage. She crossed the threshold. The waiting room at Aspen Valley Hospital didn't look like the ones in the city. It was quieter, warmer, with a gas fireplace in a stone surround and wide windows that took in a shoulder of mountain and a slice of sky. A coffee cart murmured in the corner, and a volunteer in a red vest kept refilling the carafes as if caffeine could knit hearts back together. Naomi stood just inside the automatic doors, thawing from the walk up from the bus stop, and tried to decide where a person like her was supposed to go when the only thing connecting her to the man behind the double doors was the fact that she'd dared to use his phone. She hadn't been supposed to touch it, and she'd known that. Housekeeping didn't pick up guest phones, didn't dial outside lines, didn't make judgment calls that could end careers. But last night, when the room seemed to narrow to the size of Ethan Cole's strangled breaths, rules had shrunk to the size of a lie. She'd picked up the receiver because not picking it up felt like stepping over a person on a sidewalk and calling that good manners. A woman at the desk called her forward. Her name tag read Beth. "Can I help you?" I was with a patient who just came in," Naomi said. "Mr. Ethan Cole. I was there when it happened." Beth's expression didn't shift. This was a place where nothing surprised anyone. "Are you family?" "No," Naomi said. It felt like the wrong answer and the only honest one. "But the paramedics asked me to give details. I can write them down if you need." Beth slid a clipboard across. Name, number, what you witnessed. We'll add it to his chart. Naomi wrote slowly, printing each letter like she had in grade school. No flourishes, just the facts. Left calf swelling over several days, shortness of breath, dry cough that worsened, brief episode of coughing blood, collapse in suite. I called 911 at 3:42 p.m. She added her phone number and handed it back. It looked small there. Everything did, next to the big words she couldn't write. Fear, stubbornness, all the ways pride could dress up as strength. You can take a seat, Beth said. The attending may have questions. Naomi chose a spot near the window where she could see the doors to the back and the doors to the outside at the same time, as if watching both would keep either from swallowing her whole. She didn't touch the coffee. Her hands wanted something to do, so she folded them on her knees and pressed her thumbs together until the need for motion passed. The doors swung open. A nurse stepped out with a rolling computer on a cart and called a name that wasn't his. A man in a ranch coat wiped at his eyes and followed her in. Naomi watched the doors settle again, soft and final. Minutes became a kind of weather, indistinct, heavy. She held on to small things, a toddler asleep on her mother's chest, the thin, steady scraping of a snowplow outside, the way the fireplace's blue pilot flame licked at the logs. Whenever the doors opened, she sat up straighter, and whenever they closed without his name, she forced herself back into the chair, reminding herself that the people behind those doors were working the problem, that not hearing anything could be good. "Ms. Carter?" a voice said. Naomi looked up into the face of a woman in her early 50s, with clipped gray-streaked hair, clear, steady eyes, and a badge that read, Rebecca Sterling, M.D. The name landed with a shock. She'd heard it once through a wall. Seeing it here felt like the moment a song on the radio turns into a person at your table. "Yes," Naomi said, standing. "I'm Dr. Sterling. I'm treating Mr. Cole." The doctor's voice carried the calm of someone who had learned how to pour water on other people's fires without putting the flame out entirely. "I wanted to thank you. EMS said if you hadn't made the call when you did, we might be having a very different conversation." "Is he—" Naomi couldn't make herself finish the sentence. "Critical but stable," Dr. Sterling said. "He has a pulmonary embolism, essentially a blood clot that traveled to the lungs. We started anticoagulation and supportive oxygen. We're monitoring closely." Naomi nodded, feeling the words like stones she could pick up and hold, critical but stable. "I also saw your note," the doctor went on. "Coughing blood, legs swelling, shortness of breath, good documentation. Has he flown recently?" "From San Francisco," Naomi said. 2 days before he checked in." "Any history of clotting disorders in the family? You wouldn't know, of course," Dr. Sterling corrected herself gently. "But any medications you saw? Supplements?" Naomi pictured the amber bottle, the compression sock packaging, the torn cardboard sleeve in the trash. "Compression socks," she said. "And an unlabeled bottle, brown, no sticker. I didn't touch it." The doctor's gaze sharpened, not with suspicion, but with interest. "All right, thank you. We'll run a full workup. People like Mr. Cole often push hard. Dehydration, long flights, stress. But sometimes there's more going on." Naomi thought of the way Ethan had gripped the treadmill rail like it was the only thing holding him to the earth. He kept saying he was fine. He didn't want anyone to know. "Pride is a hell of a drug," Dr. Sterling said, and then gave Naomi a wry look, the hint of a grin that respected the line they were both walking. "We're going to take care of him. I'll update you if I can, but I'll be honest. HIPAA limits what I can share. If there's a number you'd like me to have for the person on scene, I'll take it." Naomi gave her number again anyway and watched the doctor disappear back through the doors as if she were walking into weather of her own. She texted Rosa 2 words, critical, stable, and got back a string of praying hands and a call me later. Then she did the only thing she could think of. She walked to the coffee cart and poured a cup for herself, black. It tasted like paper and the inside of a long night, but the heat was good in her hands. The automatic doors sighed. Not the double doors to the back, the ones to the street. Michael Harris came in first, hair perfect despite the wind, scarf knotted just so. A second man followed, older, heavier, the kind of expensive coat that pretends it isn't expensive. Michael scanned the room, found her, and made a beeline. "Miss Carter," he said, "you're Naomi, right?" He said it the way people in his world said everything, like the answer should already be yes. "Yes," Naomi said. "I need to know what you saw," Michael said, dropping into the seat opposite without an invitation. The older man hovered behind him like a dark planet. "What time did you find him? Who else was in the room? Did you move anything?" "I told the nurse," Naomi said. "They have my statement." Michael gave a tight smile. "And now you can tell me." Naomi looked past him at the mountains, at a line of cloud snagged on a ridge. "I think the medical team is the one that needs details, not PR." The older man's mouth twitched. "Smart." "Who are you?" Naomi asked. "Richard Blackwell," he said, offering a hand he had no intention of letting her shake. "Chairman of the board." "I clean rooms," Naomi said, because that was both true and, in this moment, a kind of boundary. "Right," Richard said, withdrawing his hand. "Then you understand discretion." "I understand people," Naomi said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "He's a person." Richard's eyes chilled. "He's also an asset." "Gentlemen," a third voice said, cool as the shade on a summer porch. Dr. Sterling stood a few feet away, every inch the guardian of the line between inside and out. "This is a hospital waiting room, not a crisis communications office. Miss Carter, you're welcome to wait. Mr. Harris, Mr. Blackwell, if you have questions about Mr. Cole's condition, you can wait for our call like everyone else." Michael flushed. "We're not everyone else." "Tonight you are," Dr. Sterling said, and returned to her world, the doors whispering shut behind her. Richard stared after her, then turned that stare on Naomi as if he could move her by force of habit. When she didn't, he shook his head, annoyed, and guided Michael toward a cluster of chairs by the fireplace where their whispered words were swallowed by the crackle of gas-fed flame. Naomi stayed 2 more hours, then 3, until the volunteer in the red vest came by with a refilled carafe and the kind of smile that says, "You can go home for a few hours and come back. The mountain will still be here." Naomi scribbled a thank you on the back of her clipboard copy and tucked it in her bag. At the doors, she pressed a palm to the cold glass. The world outside was a shell of ice and shadow, the parking lot gleaming like a river. She stepped into it, the air burning clean in her lungs. Back at her apartment, she didn't undress. She sat on the couch with her coat still buttoned, the locket open in her hand. She let the radiator talk and the dark room hold her. And when sleep finally found her, it was more like a truce than a rest. Morning raised a gray lid on the town. Naomi was in the kitchen making toast she didn't want when her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. She answered anyway. "Miss Carter? This is Beth from Aspen Valley. Dr. Sterling asked me to let you know Mr. Cole made it through the night. Still critical, but stable. No visitors beyond immediate family, I'm afraid." "Thank you," Naomi breathed. The words fogged the phone like breath on glass. She put on her warmest sweater and her one good pair of boots and walked to the bus stop. On the bus, she rehearsed what she'd say at the disciplinary review, the timeline, the symptoms, the call. She'd bring the training certificates from the hotel's first aid class. She'd speak briefly and clearly. If they fired her, they fired her. Some losses were losses. Some were the price of looking yourself in the eye. The hotel lobby was its usual theater of warmth, smell of cinnamon from the bistro, bell staff in red jackets, a family laughing over a pile of wet mittens. Naomi crossed it in a straight line and took the service stair to the second floor where Tom Bradley's office looked out over the performance. He was already at his desk, tie perfectly knotted today, discipline arranged in symmetrical stacks. "Miss Carter," he said, as if the syllables weighed more now. "Have a seat." She sat. "We'll be conducting the review at 3, Tom said. Until then, per policy, you remain suspended. Do not speak to any media. Do not post about this on social platforms. Do not speak to guests about it. Do you understand?" "I haven't spoken to anyone," Naomi said, "except the hospital." "Even that is complicated," Tom replied, fingers steepled. "You are not family. You do not represent the hotel. Your actions last night went beyond your job description in ways that expose us legally." "My job is to take care of guests," Naomi said quietly. "Sometimes that looks like more than fluffing pillows." Tom's expression didn't crack. "The difference between service and liability is consent. The difference between service and negligence is a funeral," Naomi said. And then, because something like anger had burned through the layer of fear and left its edges clean, she added, "And if you want to fire me for choosing not to let a man die in our nicest room, you can, but I won't pretend I'm sorry." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the sound of 1,000 similar conversations in 1,000 offices, all of them trying to decide which lesson to learn. Tom broke it by sliding a form across the desk. "Sign that you received notice of today's meeting," she signed. When she stood, he didn't stop her. Out in the hall, Naomi's phone buzzed. She half expected Rosa or David or a spam number selling her a warranty for a car she didn't own. Instead, it was a text from an unknown contact, short and startling. "Ethan is asking for the woman who called 911. Can you come to the hospital? R. Sterling." Naomi stared at the screen. It didn't make sense. HIPAA and immediate family and all the doors she didn't have keys for. But sometimes doors opened because someone on the other side decided they should. She texted back, "On my way." On the way down the service stair, she almost collided with Rosa, hustling up with a stack of fresh linen. "Well?" "Meeting at 3, Naomi said. "But I'm going to the hospital. He asked for me." Rosa's eyebrows shot up. "Look at you, being requested by billionaires?" Naomi rolled her eyes. "Don't start." "I'm not," Rosa said, softening. "I'm proud. Text me, okay?" Outside, the sky had changed from pewter to a brittle kind of blue. Naomi jogged the last block to the bus stop, breath clouding, heart trying to jump out of the neat rhythm she'd taught it. On the bus, she sat too straight. She watched the same bakery, the same elk statue, but they looked different, like she'd tipped the map and all the streets had briefly lifted and resettled. At the hospital, Beth waved her through with a small smile and pointed to a side door instead of the main one. "Dr. Sterling said to take you back." Naomi followed a narrow corridor into a world of beeps and soft-soled shoes. They passed curtained bays where voices murmured and one where a child laughed at a cartoon on a tablet. Dr. Sterling waited by a small consult room with a glass wall and slid the door shut behind them. "He's awake," the doctor said. "Only for a little while. He asked for you by description. I told him I'd see what I could do." Naomi's throat felt too tight for a thank you, so she nodded. "He's not out of the woods," Dr. Sterling continued. "He's on anticoagulation, oxygen, and close monitoring. We may move him to a step-down unit later if things go well. There's something else." The doctor paused, weighing words. "Some of his labs are odd. It could be nothing, or it could be a clue. I'm running additional tests. If you think of anything, changes in his meds, supplements, anything unusual, you tell me." "The unlabeled bottle," Naomi said at once. "And I don't know if this matters, but he cares about what people see. He didn't want anyone to know he was weak." "It matters," Dr. Sterling said. "Shame delays medicine as surely as traffic does." They reached a door with a small window. Through it, Naomi saw Ethan, not the magazine cover, not the man pacing in cashmere, but a human propped against a pillow, oxygen cannula in place, IV in his arm. His color was better than it had been on the floor. His eyes looked older and younger at the same time. Dr. Sterling opened the door and stood back. Ethan turned his head. When he saw Naomi, something in his face, tension, wariness, unclenched. He lifted a hand a few inches off the blanket. It trembled and fell back, but the gesture was there. "You," he said, voice rough around the edges. Me, Naomi said. She stayed just inside the door, hands clasped to keep from fussing with the blanket like she fussed with duvets. How are you feeling? Like my body. Filed a complaint, he said, and even a joke that thin sounded like him. They said you called. You stayed. I waited, Naomi said. Then I went home. Then I came back. He closed his eyes a second, then opened them. Thank you. You don't have to, she began, but he shook his head. I do, he said. I told everyone I was fine. I told myself I was. You were the only one who didn't agree with my denial. Denial has a good PR team, Naomi said before she could stop herself. He made a noise that might have been a laugh if it had more oxygen in it. A knock on the door frame made them both look up. Michael stood there with a visitor pass he must have charmed from someone, his eyes already trying to manage the room. Behind him, God help them, Richard Blackwell, too. We need a word, Michael said to Ethan, as if Naomi and the doctor weren't there. You can wait, Ethan said, and his voice, though tired, had spine in it. Richard stepped forward anyway. There are investors on the line. We can't afford a lot of things, Ethan said, gaze steady. Right now, I'm paying attention to the necessary ones. Dr. Sterling moved between the bed and the men like it was the most natural thing in the world. Gentlemen, unless you are immediate family or power of attorney, your visit is over. Richard bristled. This is absurd. Not absurd, Dr. Sterling said. Medical. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it under Ethan's look. We'll be outside, he said, which meant we'll be in the hall making calls. They left. The door clicked shut. The room exhaled. Ethan turned his head back to Naomi. You're suspended? Pending a review this afternoon, Naomi said. She meant to say it lightly. It came out like it weighed what it weighed. For saving my life, he said. He looked angry then, the anger of a man who has finally learned which things deserve it. I'll fix it. You'll rest, Naomi countered. Let me deal with my job. I can handle a meeting. His eyes warmed and something like respect or recognition moved through them. Okay, he said. Okay. A nurse tapped in to check vitals. Dr. Sterling squeezed Naomi's shoulder once, a dry, human gesture that held more comfort than any speech. You should go, the doctor said. 5 minutes is our current ration. Naomi nodded. To Ethan, she said, I'll come back. If they'll let me. I'll ask for you, he said. That seems to help. She stepped into the hall. Richard and Michael were already on their phones, anger tucked into their voices like knives into napkins. Naomi ignored them. At the nurse's station, Beth was charting. Naomi thanked her again and headed for the exit, feeling every ounce of the day collecting in her bones. Outside, the cold bit good and honest. Snow sifted down again, light as flour. She checked the time. The review meeting was in 40 minutes. The bus wouldn't cut it. She started walking fast, then jogging, boots punching neat holes in the fresh white. By the time she pushed through the employees' entrance at Aspen Ridge, her cheeks stung and her breath tasted like metal. She smoothed her sweater, tucked a stray curl behind her ear, and walked upstairs. The conference room on 2 was small and beige and carefully neutral, the kind of space designed to make decisions feel inevitable. Tom sat at the head of the table with 2 HR representatives, one taking notes, one wearing a practiced sympathy. A folder lay in front of each chair. Naomi took the last seat. Ms. Carter, the sympathetic one said, we're here to talk about last night's incident. Naomi folded her hands. Yes. They reviewed the timeline. They asked if she'd entered the suite without a guest answering. She said yes. They asked if she'd used the guest phone to call 911. She said yes. They asked if she'd been trained to do that. She said no. She'd been trained to render aid and alert emergency, and she had, in that order. They wrote things down in the kind of handwriting that looks precise from across a table. Do you understand the liability you exposed the hotel to? The note-taker asked. I understand the liability of letting someone die when I could do something, Naomi said. I chose the one I could live with. Tom's pen stopped. It was the only thing in the room that moved. A knock interrupted whatever speech the sympathetic rep had queued up. The door opened. A bellman leaned in, pink with cold. "Mr. Bradley, there's a courier. Says it's urgent. From Cole Technologies." Tom frowned and took the envelope. He slid it with an immaculate fingernail and scanned the letter inside. The color in his face shifted. He passed the paper to the reps. Their eyebrows climbed in a synchronized arc. "What is it?" Naomi asked. Tom cleared his throat. "A letter of concern from Mr. Cole's company," he said, "commending your actions and advising that any punitive action taken by the hotel would be—" He paused, choosing the next phrase like it had teeth, "poorly received." Naomi stared at the table. She felt two things at once, relief and a prickle along her spine that said, "Careful. Don't let someone else's power make you into something you're not." The sympathetic rep tried to smile like she'd planned this all along. "Given the circumstances, and given the positive outcome," she began, "we will lift the suspension," Tom said, voice clipped, "pending a formal review of policy. You'll receive a written warning for procedural deviation." "A warning for saving a life," Naomi said. There was no heat in it, just the statement. Tom's gaze finally met hers. Something there had shifted, not into warmth, but into a reluctant acknowledgement that lives are messier than binders. "A warning," he repeated. "You're off the floor until tomorrow, with pay." Naomi nodded. "Understood." They dismissed her, and she stepped back into the hall feeling taller and more tired than when she'd come in. She texted Rosa, still employed, and got back a fireworks emoji and dinner on me. Downstairs, the lobby's fire hissed. Outside the tall windows, snow came down harder, the big fat flakes that meant business. Naomi crossed to the front doors, paused, and looked up toward the penthouse level out of habit. The glass reflected only the lobby lights and her own face looking back. Brown eyes, steady mouth, a woman who had held a line only she could see and was prepared to hold it again. She stepped into the weather. The wind threw fine cold against her cheeks. Somewhere up the road, a man who didn't want to be anyone's burden had asked for the housekeeper by name. Somewhere inside her, the part of her that had always noticed and always cared, uncurled like a fist opening. She didn't know what would be waiting in the hospital tomorrow, or what new rules she might have to bend to keep faith with what mattered. She only knew this walking into the snow. She would show up again. And if the phone in a guest suite, or the one ringing in a nurse's hand, was the only instrument left between life and loss, she would pick it up. The next morning brought a sky the color of brushed steel and a wind that came off the mountain like it had a grudge. Naomi wrapped her scarf twice, tugged her hat low, and walked to the bus stop with a thermos of coffee she'd remembered to fill this time. Her shift wasn't until later, but she was headed to the hospital first. The need to see Ethan, to confirm with her own eyes that he was still breathing, outweighed everything else. She stepped off the bus in front of Aspen Valley Hospital just as the snow began to fall again, small, dry flakes that spiraled in the gusts. Inside, the volunteer at the front desk waved her through with a familiarity Naomi still found strange. Yesterday, she'd been a stranger in the waiting room. Today, people seemed to know her face. Beth wasn't at the desk, but a younger nurse pointed her toward the step-down unit. Naomi's stomach tightened. Step-down meant he was improving, but it also meant more rules, more limits. She followed the hallway's soft curve until she reached room 214. Through the glass, she saw Ethan sitting up in bed, hair damp from a recent wash, a blanket tucked over his legs. An oxygen cannula still looped his ears, but the color in his cheeks was better, and his eyes, when they found hers, lit in a way that startled her. She knocked lightly and stepped inside. "You came," he said, voice low but stronger. "You asked," she replied. "I wasn't sure you'd, want to." Naomi frowned. "Why wouldn't I?" He shrugged, wincing slightly. "Because I'm me. Complication wrapped in a suit. People tend to keep their distance once they get a good look." "You weren't in a suit when I found you," she said. And I'm not good at keeping my distance. That made him laugh, short but real. Apparently. They sat in a silence that didn't feel awkward. Naomi studied him, the way he rolled the edge of the blanket between his fingers, the way he kept glancing at the door like he expected an interruption. "Has your family been by?" she asked. His eyes flicked to hers. "No. My sister's in London. My father. Well, he'd send an assistant before he'd get on a plane. And the company is at the door with pitchforks," Naomi finished for him. "Something like that," he said. "Blackwell was here this morning. He wants me to make a statement, reassure the investors. I told him to wait." "You don't sound like you want to," Naomi said. "I don't." His hand tightened on the blanket. "But this isn't just about me. Thousands of employees, stockholders, projects. When I sneeze, half the market catches a cold. And if you collapse again," he gave her a thin smile, "then the market gets pneumonia." Naomi didn't smile back. "You joke, but you scared people. You scared me." Something in his face shifted, a seriousness she hadn't seen before. "I know, and I'm not used to that, needing anyone." "Everyone needs someone," Naomi said, "even people in penthouses." Before he could answer, Dr. Sterling came in, flipping through a chart. "Vitals are improving. We'll keep you on anticoagulants for now, and I want physical therapy in a few days to keep circulation up." She glanced at Naomi. "Good to see you again." Naomi nodded. "You too." "Unfortunately," the doctor continued, "Mr. Cole's stress levels are not improving. You need to rest, not draft press releases." Ethan sighed. "If I don't say something, they'll fill the silence with rumors." "Then let them," Dr. Sterling said crisply. "You're not a machine to be switched back on because the shareholders are restless." When she left, Ethan leaned back against the pillows, eyes closed. She's right, but the pressure doesn't stop. Naomi thought of the disciplinary review, of Tom's clipped tone, of the way rules bent or held depending on who was in the room. "Pressure's just weight," she said. "It's how you carry it that counts." His eyes opened. "And you? How do you carry it?" "I don't carry it alone," Naomi said simply. He studied her a moment longer, then nodded like he'd just been handed a piece of a puzzle he didn't know he'd been working on. 2 days later, Naomi was back at work, her keycard reactivated and her schedule full. Word about the penthouse incident had spread through staff like wildfire, each telling slightly different. Some had her performing CPR, others said she'd dragged him to safety single-handedly. Naomi let them talk. The truth was simpler and less cinematic. Mid-morning, she was restocking towels on the 3rd floor when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. "Naomi?" Ethan's voice, faintly amused. "You sound out of breath." "I'm working," she said. "Some of us don't get to lounge in bed all day." "I'm being discharged," he said. "Thought you might want to know." "That's good news." "It is," he agreed. "Except Blackwell's picking me up, which means I'm walking out of here into a conversation I don't want to have." Naomi hesitated. "Do you want me to be there?" He chuckled. "That obvious?" She met him at the hospital entrance, where a light snow dusted the walkway. Blackwell's black SUV idled at the curb, driver waiting. Ethan stood beside a nurse signing forms, wearing a long coat over casual clothes. He looked tired, but more himself. When he saw Naomi, his expression eased. Perfect timing. Blackwell emerged from the SUV, coat collar turned up. "Cole, we need to talk before you disappear." "Blackwell," Ethan said evenly. "This is Naomi Carter. She works at the Ridge." The older man's eyes flicked over her, like she was a line item on a report. "Yes, the housekeeper." Naomi met his gaze without flinching. "The one who called 911? Blackwell's mouth tightened. "Right." Ethan stepped between them, subtly but deliberately. "We'll talk tomorrow. Today I'm going home." Blackwell started to protest, but Ethan's voice sharpened just enough. "Tomorrow." The SUV door shut harder than necessary when the chairman climbed back in. Naomi exhaled. "You enjoy making things complicated," she said. "It's a gift," Ethan replied, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like someone who knew the cost of his gifts. That evening, Naomi found a note slipped under her apartment door. Heavy cream paper, her name in neat block letters. Inside, a simple line in black ink. "Sometimes, noticing is the only thing that keeps a man alive. E.C." She sat with it in her hands for a long time, the radiator humming in the background. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering everything in the same clean white. Naomi left the note on the coffee table that night, right where she could see it from the couch. The paper's clean weight felt strange in her hand, like it belonged to another world, the one upstairs from hers. She read the line again. Sometimes noticing is the only thing that keeps a man alive, and wondered if Ethan had meant it just for her, or if it was the kind of truth a man writes when he's finally been forced to admit he's not bulletproof. The next morning at work, Rosa found her folding fresh sheets in the laundry room. "You hear the news?" Rosa asked, eyes bright. "No," Naomi said, still smoothing the fitted corners. "There's a press conference at the lodge. Noon, Cole himself. They're calling it an update on his health and future plans." Naomi froze, hands in the fabric. "Today?" "Today," Rosa confirmed. "And guess who's been strongly encouraged to be there?" Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Me?" "You," Rosa said with a smirk. "Tom says it'll reflect well for the hotel." Naomi almost laughed. 2 weeks ago, Tom had been ready to fire her for procedural deviation. Now she was apparently good PR. By noon, the lodge's main conference room was packed. Reporters filled the chairs, cameras lined the back wall, and every light in the place seemed trained on the podium. Naomi stood near the side, not far from Rosa, watching the organized chaos of media people jostling for position. When Ethan appeared, the room quieted. He looked healthier, still pale, but steady on his feet, wearing a dark suit without a tie. The oxygen tube was gone, though Naomi noticed the slight hitch in his breathing when he crossed to the podium. "Thank you for being here," Ethan began. His voice carried that careful mix of strength and humility people learn only after being knocked flat. 2 weeks ago, I experienced a serious medical emergency. I'm here today because someone noticed what I couldn't admit and acted. Naomi Carter. Every head turned toward her. "Saved my life," he continued. "She didn't know me, she had nothing to gain, and she risked her job to do it. That is the kind of courage we should notice and honor." Naomi felt her cheeks heat. She gave a small nod, unsure where to look. Ethan went on, "This experience forced me to think about the people we overlook every day. The workers whose names we don't know, the neighbors whose struggles we don't see. That ends for me today." He paused, letting the cameras click. "I'm starting the See Them Foundation. Its mission is simple: to make the unseen visible and to remove the barriers, financial, social, systemic, that keep people from getting the help they need. Our first donation will fund medical screenings and emergency training for hospitality staff nationwide." The applause started cautiously, then grew. Naomi saw reporters scribbling, cameras zooming in. Blackwell was in the back, arms crossed, face like carved stone. Michael, beside him, was smiling for the cameras, but Naomi recognized the PR calculation in his eyes. After the conference, the crowd thinned, and Ethan crossed the room to her. "You hate this kind of attention," he said quietly. "I prefer my work behind the scenes," she replied. "Too late for that," he said with a half-smile. "The Foundation's board meets next month. I'd like you to be part of it." Naomi blinked. "I clean rooms, Ethan." "You save lives," he countered, "and you see people. That's exactly what I need on the board." It wasn't flattery. His tone was matter-of-fact, like he was describing the weather. Still, Naomi hesitated. I've never been in a boardroom." "Then we'll bring the boardroom to you," he said. "Think about it. She did think about it, on the bus home, in the quiet of her apartment, while making tea she forgot to drink. She thought about the night in the penthouse, about the look in his eyes when he realized he might die, and the way it had shifted since then. She thought about the guests she'd helped over the years, finding a lost ring in a drain, fetching extra blankets for a shivering child, calling an ambulance for a man who insisted he'd just stood up too fast. By the end of the week, she'd called him. "I'll do it," she said. The months that followed moved fast. Naomi learned more about nonprofit bylaws, fundraising, and grant proposals than she'd ever imagined. She kept working part-time at the lodge while attending foundation meetings, traveling with Ethan to meet hospital administrators, and speaking, awkwardly at first, at events. Somewhere along the way, the awkwardness faded. She wasn't there for the cameras. She was there for the housekeepers, the dishwashers, the valets, the people whose work kept the world turning while no one looked. The first big project launched that spring, a mobile clinic for rural hotels and resorts, offering free health screenings and CPR training. Naomi stood with Ethan at the ribbon cutting, the mountain air bright with the smell of pine and thawing earth. "You ready for this?" Ethan asked as the cameras gathered. "Not even a little," she said, smiling. "But I'm here." He gave her a look, one she recognized now as his version of good. That's all that matters. That night, after the speeches and photos, they walked along the resort's quiet service road. The snowmelt ran in thin streams along the edges, carrying pine needles and grit. "You know," Ethan said, "the day you walked into that suite, I thought you were just part of the background." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know better," he said simply. They walked a few more steps before Naomi said, "You're not so bad yourself, Cole." The See Them Foundation grew, and so did Naomi's role in it. She eventually left housekeeping, not because she wanted to stop working with her hands, but because she'd found a different way to take care of people. She still stopped by the lodge often, still hugged Rosa in the laundry room, still remembered to notice the small things. And every time she saw Ethan, whether in a meeting, at a clinic, or walking beside her in the evening, she remembered that first truth. Sometimes noticing is the only thing that keeps a person alive. But now she knew the second truth, too. Sometimes it's also what keeps them together. I've lived long enough to know that life's turning points don't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they step quietly into a room disguised as an ordinary moment, a phone ringing, a stranger's hand steadying yours, or a voice that tells you to sit down and breathe. Watching this story unfold reminded me of the way small acts can swell into something larger than anyone expects. From that first night in the suite to the Foundation's first ribbon cutting, what stayed with me was not the headlines or the applause, but the quiet resolve of a woman who simply refused to look away. We all carry our own measure of pride and prejudice, shaped by where we come from and what we've been taught to see. In my years, I've seen the Black community rise time and again against the weight of misjudgment, proving that dignity is not handed out by those in power. It's claimed by living it every day. This story is not just about one man's recovery or one woman's courage. It's a reminder that we are called, each of us, to keep our eyes open for the truth, especially when it hides behind what the world calls unimportant. The heart of it is simple. Hold fast to your dignity, and when the moment comes, stand up for what's right with steadiness and humanity. Doing so won't just reclaim justice, it can build something better from the hurt. I've seen it in small towns, in city streets, and in the Black community churches that welcomed neighbors without asking for credentials. In our own lives, we may not get the cameras or the speeches, but the choice remains the same, to act or to turn away. It's much like a lamp in a quiet window on a dark road. It doesn't shout or chase down travelers. It simply burns, steady and certain, showing the way to anyone who needs it. That light might be a word, a gesture, or a simple phone call made at the right time. And in the dark stretches of life, whether you're in the hills of Colorado or in the heart of the Black community on a rainy city block, that light can mean the difference between being lost and finding your way home. So take a moment now. Set down your coffee, let the noise fade, and think about who in your own story has been that light. And maybe think of when you've had the chance to be it for someone else. These moments don't always make the evening news, but they make the fabric of our days stronger. If this story touched your heart, consider passing on its warmth to someone who might be walking their own cold, uncertain road. The world has no shortage of shadows, but we, together, can choose to keep the lamps lit.